Hello kids, and welcome to my YouTube channel, The Cookie Club. This site is designed to get kids baking with fun, child-friendly recipes. And today we're going to be making rainbow biscuits because that seems quite topical and fun to do. So we're going to do a basic biscuit dough recipe, which we're then going to rest in the fridge for an hour. Then we will come back to it, rolling it out and cutting it into rainbow shapes. I'll show you how to do that. And then if you want to ice them after they come out of the oven, I'll show you how to do that as well. Okay, so let's get going. So it's a basic biscuit dough. So we start the way we start any biscuit or cake, and that is with butter. Okay, soft butter. And I would use butter and not margarine in biscuits. They don't quite have the snap if you use margarine as they do when you have biscuits. That nice snap that you get when you break into them. Okay, so we've got soft butter and we've got caster sugar. All the ingredients were shown at the start of the video and will be shown at the end as well. So we're going to get to doing this, and the technical term, as lots of you kids will already know, is creaming. We're going to cream together our butter and our sugar, and look, it really only takes moments to combine it all, but then you want to take another half a minute or so to cream it. The longer you spend creaming it, and I don't mean hours, maximum of a couple of minutes, but the longer you spend creaming it, the better. Here we go. And if you keep going and going, the mixture will actually get whiter and whiter, more like cream than butter. So there we go, lovely creamy consistency to our butter and sugar. Okay, so now we're going to be adding our next ingredient, which is an egg, and my little assistant has already cracked that for me, so I'm just going to pop that in. I've got a nice free range egg here. I know not all of you can get hold of those, but if you can, that's a good thing to do. So we're going to beat in our eggy. Now, when you start beating it, initially it starts to look a bit curdled. Now that's what curdled looks like, but don't worry, just keep going. And providing you haven't added too many eggs, it will soon emulsify into a lovely creamy mixture. So keep going until it doesn't look curdled anymore, so that's perfect. And then we're going to add our next ingredient, which is some vanilla extract. So I'm getting out my measurer here, and I've got a ½ teaspoon measurer. I don't know if you can see that, but it's written on the spoon, ½ teaspoon, and that's how much we need. So have a whole one of those.
And if you don't have a ½ teaspoon, then you can just use a whole teaspoon, but just do half of it.
Exactly, you can do that. Right, let's put that away. Okay, so mix our delicious vanilla in. Oh, and now I can smell all the lovely vanilla coming up from the bowl. Make sure you scrape down any bits of butter or egg or sugar that you have up the sides, because you don't want to end up with a clump of it at the end. So scrape it all down and mix it through. Okay, so that's our wet mix. Then I'm going to grab another bowl and I'm going to put our dry mix in. Now our dry mix is our flour, which is already measured out. There we go. And we have here some baking powder, ½ teaspoon of baking powder and ½ teaspoon of salt. I'm going to be adding that as well. There we go. And I'm just going to be lightly stirring that through so that the salt goes all the way through the mix, and you don't just end up with a clump of salt in one biscuit. It goes all the way through the mix, and the same with the baking powder. The baking powder will just help it rise just a little bit in the oven. We don't want too much of a rise, it's a biscuit, but that will help it bake properly. So there we go. Once we have mixed all our dry ingredients together, we then add them to our wet ingredients. So here we go. And the reason we do it in a separate bowl is, as I said, so that the salt and the baking powder can go all the way through the mix. There we go. We're going to gently stir. We're not going to whisk really quickly. We're going to gently stir this in. We don't want the flour going everywhere. And we're going to make sure we scrape down the sides of the bowl as we go until we end up with a delicious dough consistency. Now, it can be difficult to show on a screen exactly what consistency you have, but this consistency is a little bit, just a little bit too wet. It looks really too wet, but it isn't. It's just a little bit too wet. So I need to add another spoonful or two of flour. So I'm going to get my assistant to get my flour for me. There we go. And I'm going to add just a little bit more flour. Now, you might not need to do this. It very much depends on the flour that you've used. I've used a super fine flour, and perhaps that has affected the consistency. So I'm just going to add a little bit, because you can't take the flour back out again once you've mixed it in. So you don't want to add too much. Ah, there we go. That's better. You can see straight away that it's pulling away from the sides. Now, it doesn't matter if it's a little bit sticky, but we didn't want it wet and gooey the way it was before. So there we go. That's perfect. It's pulling away from the sides, as you can see, mostly. And that is perfect. So what we're going to do now is get some cling film out.
And it may look a little bit like bread dough, but it really isn't.
Yes, it does look a little bit like bread dough. That's right, it isn't, because it's got lots of sugar in it. There we go. So I've put some cling film out. If you don't have cling film, then you can just put it in a bowl and put a lid on the bowl and put that in the fridge. But otherwise, if you have got cling film and you want to use it, you want to scoop it out onto the cling film and make sure you scrape it all out. Don't leave loads of dough in the bottom of your bowl to go in your wash.
Because then it's wasting all your ingredients.
It is.
And it might break your washing machine.
Both things are true. And it would be wasting all your lovely biscuit ingredients. We want all those biscuit ingredients in our tummy. So, once the mixture is the right consistency, you should be able to do this very lightly. If I held on to it for a while, it would come off in my hands and it would make my hands sticky. But I'm just very gently rolling it into a circle, and then I'm going to cover it with this cling film. As I say, you can just put it in a bowl and put a lid on it. And I'm going to wrap it up and put it in the fridge for up to an hour. Now, you can immediately use this dough if you're in a real rush, but it is much stickier if you use it straight away, and therefore you need to add more flour. And that will make your biscuits tougher and not so light and crispy as we'd like. So it's a good thing, especially if you're just at home and you've got time, to pop this in the fridge now for, as I say, up to an hour, about at least half an hour, until it's firmed up a bit, and then we'll come back and roll it out into our shapes. Okay, see you in a minute. Okay, kids, so we're back with our dough that's been chilling in the fridge now for up to an hour. And I'm just going to unwrap it, and we will need to have a rolling pin on the side if you've got one on the side, and also if you have one, some sort of non-stick liner for your table. So I've got a nice non-stick liner here that I can roll out on, but if you haven't, you can use the cling film that you've just wrapped it up in, or a new bit of cling film. And if you roll it out on the cling film, then it won't stick, and it'll be much easier then to move on to a tray. Okay, so I've got my ball of dough here. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to break it in half, because I don't want to warm up the whole ball of dough. Put some aside for a moment and just work on half at a time. Now then, if it's a particularly sticky dough, you can use a little bit of flour or a little bit of icing sugar just to stop it from sticking. But I'd use a little bit of flour, not too much. I don't want to affect the consistency of the dough. but I just don't want it to stick to my rolling pin. So when you're doing dough, ordinarily you pick it up and move it round as you do it. It's quite a delicate dough, so if it's on a non-stick surface like this, you don't need to pick it up. The reason for picking it up ordinarily is to make sure that it hasn't stuck. Okay, so we're going to roll it out to be about 1/2 centimetre thick. So I'll show you what that looks like. You can get a ruler and see what a 1/2 centimetre thick looks like that. Now we can of course cut this to any shape you like. If you haven't got any cutters, you can simply use a safe knife and cut it into whatever shape you like. If you've got some round cutters, you could use those. Little gingerbread men cutters, you could use those. Whatever you've got to hand. But I'm going to be making rainbows today. So I'm going to be taking a nice large round cutter. Again, doesn't have to be this big. And if you haven't got a cutter, you could use a clean tin. So this is a tin that's been thoroughly cleaned by a parent. It hasn't got any sharp edges. So it's okay to use, and you can just use that. Okay, but I have a cutter, so here we go. I'm going to go right to the edge, so I use as much of the dough as I can, and I'm going to make a cut into it. Now I'm going to show you with just this one how I'm going to make it into a rainbow shape, and then you can go ahead and do as many as you can. So we've got our round bit there. Then I'm going to be taking this and cutting out another circle near the bottom there. Like that, taking that away. Then I'm going to be using a knife and cutting away. And can you see we have a rainbow shape there? Now you can make it as perfect or imperfect as you like, but that is basically how you can make a rainbow shape. So go ahead, make all your shapes, and then come back to me and we'll get on with the next part. Right, so I'm down to my last bit of dough here, and each time I've gathered the scraps together and re-rolled them out just gently. Try and do it calmly and gently, and don't play with the dough too much with your hands because you don't want it to get hot and sticky. So this is my last bit, and the easiest way I found of doing it is cutting out a nice big circle and then cutting that circle in half like this, popping it on my baking tray, which I will show you in a moment, and then cutting out the little circles for the underside of the rainbow. So here they are on my baking tray, and then I've used the head of my little gingerbread man cutter to create the circle underneath, and that seems to make the perfect size circle underneath. So I only have a little bit of dough left, not enough to make another big rainbow. And by the way, this is not the amount of rainbows I've made. I've got a whole other tray over on my side. I'll show you in a moment. So I'm just going to make a free form shape, and I usually like to do a little freeform shape, and that's the one that I try. So once it's cooked from the oven, that's the one I try. It's my spare one. So there we go. So there's 3 on there. And another 12 on here. So that size cutter, I'll tell you what that was in a moment, makes 12, 13, 14, 15 rainbows and a little bit. And the size of that cutter, the one that I used, was 10 centimetres. Obviously you can use any size cutter you like, but if you have a 10 centimetre cutter, that should be approximately how many you get to make. So now you need to get a parent or an adult in your house to preheat the oven for you. If it's a fan oven, it needs to go to 160 degrees. And if it's a convection oven, slightly hotter at 180. And then they go in the oven for between 10 and 15 minutes. I usually find that 12 is perfect. But have a look at them at 10 minutes. If they're all golden brown and delicious looking, then they're ready. Otherwise, if they're not quite browned up, pop them back in the oven for a few more minutes and keep an eye on them, because it goes very quickly from pale brown to dark brown. And although they'll still taste nice dark brown, the darker they get, the more burnt they start to taste, and you don't want them to be too burnt. So keep an eye on them, take them out of the oven when they're looking golden brown, and obviously get your adult to take them out of the oven carefully for you. Once you've done that, you can come back to me and you can see how I decorated them. Thank you very much. See you in a minute. Okay then, so our cookies have come out of the oven and here they are, looking just nice and brown around the edges, and that's just perfect. It took 12 minutes in the oven and that came out perfectly. Leave them on the side to dry completely, to cool down completely, otherwise when you bite into them they'll be very soft. And also, if you're going to ice them, they need to be completely cold first, or the icing will just run off of them. Okay, so they are our lovely rainbow shapes, if that's what you've done. And now you might want to ice them. So I've got lots of different colours I can ice with, but I've picked out 4, and I've mixed a couple of tablespoons of icing sugar with 1 teaspoon of boiled water that has been cooled down. So it's cold water, but it was boiled first to get rid of any germs. And I've used that, and then I've added a tiny bit of colouring to each of my colours, and I've done 4 colours. Now, I'm not a brilliant icer. I've mentioned this in other videos. I'm not great at it, but you can have lots and lots of fun with icing. So the first colour I have here is a nice bright luminous green, so I'm going to have a go with that. I'm going to move some of these out of the way and just start on one here. Okay, so now we can do them any way we like because they're owls. So you can do faces on them, you can do stripes on them, you can do dots on them, you can make them look more like traditional rainbows by doing stripes on them. I think I'm going to do stripes and faces on mine. There we go. That one looks like it's got a sad face. Poor rainbow. It must be a rainy day. And then we can just keep doing lots of colours until we have exactly what we want. And you can go crazy with it because they are your biscuits, aren't they? There we go. And I've also got an icing pen here which I'm going to use. As I say, I'm not brilliant at icing, but they do look quite good fun. There we go. So there's my sad rainbow face. Here we are. Let's do another one. So we'll just do some proper stripes perhaps on this one. And if you have any friends or family, especially anybody that's had to work through all of this chaos, it might be quite nice to give them biscuits if they're accepting gifts from people. You maybe don't want to fill the whole biscuit with icing either, otherwise it will be incredibly sweet. Now, if you don't have coloured icing but you still want to do some sort of rainbow theme, perhaps you might have some sprinkles handy. Then what you could do is you could put any colour, even just white icing, on one of your rainbows, and then you could sprinkle it with sprinkles. So I'm going to put a few blobs of colour on, just because I've already made up colours, so we'll just use those. And then my little assistant is going to put some rainbow coloured sprinkles on. There we go. There we are, assistant, on them. There we are. Perhaps a few more. It's not like you to not put lots on. There we go. So there we are. These are our rainbow biscuits, and you can decorate them any way you like, and I think you'll agree that they're not perfect, but they are gorgeous. I hope you've enjoyed making these biscuits with us today, and that you'll make some and perhaps send me some pictures. And please like the video if you do. Right, goodbye for now.
Bye.